other good news is, increasing numbers of engaged, especially these younger consumers, seeing the wine industry as a leader in sustainable practice. It's a concept that they can see at work, they can taste it, and that matters to them. And we know that it matters to them and how they and who they purchase from. So, I think, again, from a global perspective, but absolutely Italian perspective, this is authentically how a lot of these wines are being made anyway. And that really is resonating with American consumers, and it is driving their purchasing choices.
Welcome to Masterclass U.S. Wine Market with me, Barbara Fitzgerald. In this show, we'll break down the complexities of selling wine in the U.S. by discussing the relevant issues of today with experts from around the globe. Each episode serves up 3 key insights to help elevate your winery's presence in the U.S. market. So grab a pen and paper and let's pave the way for your success in the U.S. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Masterclass U.S. Wine Market. Today, I am so pleased to welcome Susan Kostrzewa to the show. Susan is a wine, food, and travel journalist and editor with over 25 years of publishing and content experience. She's the former editor-in-chief of Wine Enthusiast and currently runs her own content consulting business, Resplendent Ink, as well as providing recent contributions to outlets like jamessuckling.com, jancesrobinson.com, Wine Business Monthly, and Food and Wine. She's also a host of a wine culinary tour globally, working with the luxury tour operator Gunnell Innovation. So, Susan, I'm so excited to have you here. You are such a wonderful, phenomenal woman in this industry.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm really pleased to be here.
Great. And before we dive into our chat today, do you want to tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you came to work in the wine business?
How did I come to work in the wine business? Like many people in the wine business, I came to it from a somewhat circuitous route. I started out as a travel journalist. I studied journalism and writing in school and college at Northwestern, and ended up falling in love with someone from California. Moved out to California as a travel editor and writer, and just in the time of being in Marin County, had great access to Napa and Sonoma, and was convinced that if I was going to write about travel, I better know something about wine and food. So that's kind of how it happened. And then eventually I moved fully into wine journalism. It was the right time, the right place, and it was very interesting to me. So that's sort of the direction that I came from.
Amazing. Amazing. And I love that you started in travel, and that still kind of is an important part of how you engage with the wine world. You are really kind of the champion, I think, of wine travel and experiences and what it does to boost the industry.
Yeah, I mean, obviously these are 2 passions of mine and have been for a long time. But, I think early on I recognized, and it's kind of come more and more to fruition, I recognized that connection between wine and travel was a really wonderful way to engage people in wine. It's a great entry point, and it seems to just be increasing in sort of, importance. And it's one of the areas of wine, one of the good news areas in wine right now is the growth of enotourism. So it's nice that, it actually did evolve in the direction I kind of thought it would.
Yeah, I cut my teeth in the DTC marketing space in Sonoma County, California. So I believe very strongly also in enotourism, and it's been such a treat, as my career has gone more global, to see that enotourism becoming more global, and what was so normal for us here in California is becoming the norm in so many wine regions around the world, especially in Italy.
Absolutely. And Italy being so perfectly poised to offer those experiences that people want.
Yeah,
In many ways, very authentically and naturally poised to do that. So
exactly.
it is definitely one of the areas of sort of, again, one of the bright spots that I see, going forward, especially for the Italian market, as far as sort of hospitality and in-person experiential perspectives go. I think there's a lot of excitement for the future in Italy on those counts.
Wonderful. Well, before we go too deep into our conversation, we'll tell everyone what our 3 key takeaways for this episode are so they can take their notes in a nice organized way. So, what we're excited to dive into with you, Susan, are number one, consumption behaviors in the American market and why it's not all gloom and doom. Number two, how experiential in person consumer and trade events are an opportunity for Italian wine business and how that relates to wine travel trends, as we've just been chatting about. And then number three, how to reach American consumers with creative outreach and marketing, regardless of your budget or winery size. So let's just dive right into it. We said we're going to start talking about the American wine consumer and maybe talking about what people are getting incorrect at this moment in time. So there's been so much conversation about declining wine consumption in the US, and it is true. That is what some of the data shows. But numbers don't paint the whole picture. So what are you seeing beneath the headlines that gives you optimism, Susan?
Yeah, I mean, I think, listen, the reality is the US market overall is, our economy is tough right now. Inflation is high. We know that it's a tough time and we know that consumption is declining. However, in my opinion, there are a lot of opportunities and there are a lot of positive things happening. I mean, one of the things that we've seen for some time, and it even, again, considering the economy the way it is that people are trading up. They're choosing quality versus maybe quantity. So we're seeing that spending on slightly more expensive wines or quality wines has continued to go up. So that may impact more of a budget producer in a negative way, but I think a lot of producers, especially in the Italian market, they're offering a little bit more of a premium and quality product, and there does seem to be more of an interest in that in the American market than we might have seen previously. Do you want me just to go through some of my points that I see as positive, or would you like to?
Yes, tell us the good news. People need good news these days.
Okay. So other good news is, increasing numbers of engaged, especially these younger consumers, are seeing the wine industry, I think, seeing the wine industry as a leader in sustainable practice. It's a concept that they can see at work, they can taste it, and that matters to them. And we know that it matters to them and who they purchase from. So, I think, again, from a global perspective, but absolutely Italian perspective, this is authentically how a lot of these wines are being made anyway. And that really is resonating with American consumers, and it is driving their purchasing choices. And also the idea of wellness. We know that American consumers are very interested in that as well, overall, regardless of age. So these lower alc, organic, sustainable wines, again, that are sort of more intrinsic to the Italian market, are definitely of interest to American consumers, increasingly, of interest to them. And it's something that they're willing to pursue and pay for.
Yeah.
So just a couple more, positive things that I see. We'll talk more about this, but I think what's happening is that the cream rises to the top. I think we're in a challenging time, but I think wineries that are being creative, that are, have evolved, that are looking to new ways of doing business are actually doing well. So those wineries are leading with hospitality. They're really focusing on brand clarity, and they're also offering a disciplined inventory rather than discounting. I think just maybe sort of focusing down on a more, I'd say, a clearer brand identity and maybe fewer SKUs is helping. I also see digital engagement and direct to consumer relationships. These are all practices that I think the savvy wineries are employing, and it seems to be working. So they're seeing growth. Obviously, the people who are continuing to do as they have before and maybe not putting as much effort into innovating or evolving, they're having issues, they're having problems. The thing that I keep reading, keep seeing, keep saying is it can't be business as usual. And as many people have commented on in the industry, it probably never will be that again. So I think we need to recognize that wine culture has moved on. It's something that we have to all do with it. And we don't have the option of kind of going to the same playbook that we used to have.
Yeah.
A couple other things really quick. Private label wines are doing really well. A lot of these we're seeing from Costco, Total Wine, et cetera. But these are partnerships, with top producers. They offer discounted price to US consumers, but still high quality product. I mean, those are doing well. Secondary markets, I talk about this a lot, which is the Boulders, the Atlantas, Portland, Maine. There's still a lot of cities and markets in the US that are hungry for wine, that aren't saturated with wine, that can be explored. And there still is a lot of engagement in those areas. And then, the final thing I'll mention is wine travel, areas adjacent to wine consumption. There are areas like that are growing, and I think we'll probably get to that later. So anyway, you can see that I believe there are actually some great areas of opportunity, and I'm sure we'll get into even more of them as we talk.
Yeah, exactly. I think some of the pieces that you said really landed for me too. I have a client who she makes wine in Umbria, and she sells right now exclusively into the state of Tennessee because she has a home connection there. So it made sense to start there. But she is selling so much wine that she can't get it over here fast enough. And I think that's just a perfect example of, don't ignore. Of course, everyone wants to be in New York, Miami, Chicago, but these secondary markets, especially, during the pandemic, these urban areas had such an outflux to areas like these secondary markets. And so there are a lot of people there now who are used to drinking really good wine who are frothing for it.
Such a good point. I think the way that I'm sure this happened all over the world, but certainly in the US, you saw this distribution of people to areas that, again, might not have been so mature on the food and wine side. Not saying that, Boulder isn't mature, it is obviously. But yeah, you really did see a change there. And then, in general, you also saw a lot of people in the culinary space, chefs, et cetera, who even before the pandemic, to be honest, moved into some of those markets
Hmm.
because they were like, look, I'm a new chef or I'm an experimental chef. I can't set up shop in New York City. I cannot afford to do business there, but I can do business in Portland, Maine. And I'm sophisticated and I'm going to, have an amazing wine list. And I'll probably have diners and consumers who are excited to try these things. So sometimes I think it's hard and it feels risky as a producer to sort of, commit to some of these areas because again, that LA and New York, that's where everybody is. And
Hmm.
but it's really changed. And I think the demand is there. And, it's you can be the first to really get in a certain category and work with some of these chefs and restaurants and diners. And that can create a bond that is really, really meaningful and long term.
Absolutely. So, what would you say are some of the behaviors you're seeing in any US market that suggests that consumers are really craving, the hospitality, the experiences, the connection around wine more than just kind of product education?
I think it's interesting because I'm co-hosting these tours, as you mentioned in my bio. I've been working with a tour operator and, sort of as their wine host on these tours through Europe. And so anecdotally, beyond all the numbers and stats, and I'll talk about some things as well, but I see what these wine interested consumers are doing. I love working with this company because I'm just so nosy and I really want to be really close to the consumer because I think in the industry, sometimes we really do get removed from the reality of how people are interacting with wine. And this enables me to really see what they want. And, they want education. They want to meet the owners. They ask a ton of questions about the family history, how things are made, the challenges in the vineyard. So they want that kind of connection. They want authenticity. They want to know the real story behind these wineries. That goes beyond the pH in the wine or what the aromas are. I mean,
Hmm.
that's important too, but I see that firsthand. And then I've worked with James Suckling and his team in various capacities. As a writer, I worked as an editorial director for them for a while on contract, and I've attended his events for years. And the attendance at those events, it's fantastic. And it's consumers, I mean, you have trade there, but it really is a wide, sort of vast array of consumers who love being there together. And they love to have interaction with the owners and the winemakers, which is something that I think those events offer. But it's also, they want to be together drinking wine. It's a social event as much as it is an educational event. So for me, that in-person experiential sort of, more sort of 365, experience of wine, the smells, the sounds, the other people, the whole environment. And this is what people are craving. And those events and these tours that I've been doing and tours like it are growing. So
Yeah.
it's clear to me that, and I'm a writer, I'm a journalist. I love to write about this stuff and have people read, but I think it goes way beyond that now, and it has to.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's how kind of the experience of so much of, I mean, I don't want to call wine a product, but this is how products are kind of being sold today, right? It's an experience.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
wine is no exception.
Exactly. Exactly. I think, something that probably really from my early days at Wine Enthusiast, I used to say, of course the industry is unique. Of course the product is very unique. But why are we so isolated? Why aren't we looking at other markets, and other industries to hopefully bring some good practice into our own
Hmm.
industry? I think we live a little bit in a bubble sometimes. I don't think that we can do that anymore. And I think it's been proven we have to think outside of the bubble that we might have been in. But, I think good practice and good communication and great experiences resonate with people of all, sort of interests. And we should be doing the same in our own industry.
Yeah, here, here. Well, let's talk a little bit specifically about for our Italian producers. What are the aspects of Italian wine culture or Italian lifestyle that are really kind of deeply resonating with American consumers today?
This may seem very obvious, but I think food and wine pairing continues to be an area that, especially on the American side of things, I think sometimes when I talk to, colleagues in Europe, they're sort of like, well, yeah, I mean, food and wine pairing, this is what we all do. Like, we understand that. It's like, well, actually, the American market is a little bit behind the game on that, but we're catching up. So I think the concept of wine sort of as a liquid food to be enjoyed like any great food and along with other foods. I think that that's something that finally people are sort of getting a handle on. It used to be that people would consume wine in the U.S. without food. It was like a separate category. And again, I think that always confused people from other, more wine saturated cultures. It's like, well, why would you drink this wine and not have food with it? We always drink and eat together. So we're finally, I think, in the US getting to that point. And Italy, Italy, I think Italian food is one of the most popular in America. It's
Yeah.
everywhere at varying degrees of authenticity, but it is everywhere. And, wine and food are so integrated in Italian culture. And I think, again, that's something that really increasingly has resonated with American consumers. They're so interested in that. So, also beyond that, I would say, Italian, as far as aspects of Italian wine culture or lifestyle, I talked about travel. I think Italy is the perfect place to experience the immersive journey into wine. So increasingly, you're seeing people who I've done two of these. Actually, this will be my second wine tour that I'm hosting in Italy. We'll be in Sicily in September.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, we were in Tuscany last year. It's just, it's such a natural integrated experience. And I think, again, that's what Americans are looking for. And they love Italy, they love Italian culture. So, I mean, I think these are two areas that could really continue to grow for Italian producers as far as things that they could lean into that will grow as far as popularity. And again, very authentically set up to provide these experiences.
Yeah, I love that call out because these are not things that like Italians have to try to curate, right? I mean, we say the phrase a lot, la dolce vita, but for an Italian, they might be like, this is so overdone, this is so kitschy. And it's like, no, you don't understand. Americans, like, they crave this kind of experience because we don't have the kind of cultural inheritance of just slowing down to enjoy time and people and space that they do. So bring it here. People in this country need it.
Yeah, I mean, and timing wise, more than ever. I think this idea of, I love when you mention like the pace. I mean, to me, that's also something that plays into the slower pace, the more, sort of deliberate pace, the more intentional pace of enjoying wine and food over a table with family and friends, not timing yourself. Okay, I have 45 minutes. This is the world we live in the US.
Mm.
I have 15 minutes for this. I have 45 minutes for that. I've got 10 minutes for this. We live so closely to our clocks and our watches. and it's part of who we are. But I think people increasingly need a break from that. And,
Hmm.
I think Italian culture is all about that. So it's something, like I said, something to lean into and to promote and hopefully bring to people and give them that little escape, whether it's them coming to you and having the escape on your property or at your winery, or you creating events or environments in the US that kind of emulate that. I think that that's very appealing.
Definitely. Well, this is a perfect segue into our second takeaway, talking about why experiences matter now more than ever. So, as we kind of started this conversation saying, you are one of the greatest champions of experiential wine tourism, in person experiences. I mean, you kind of have already answered this, but we'll pack it up in a little soundbite. Why are these events becoming more important in today's market with US consumers?
Well, first of all, I've heard for years, I can speak anecdotally from my own experience for myself, but also for years I've heard from wineries that if they can just get people into their winery and give them a good experience, they will have customers for life. And that's even with the more fickle customers and consumers, I should say, of today. I mean, I've seen it myself. People will visit a winery, have a great experience, take those wines home, and they'll want to relive their time and magical experience every time they open bottles from that brand. It just brings it all back. It's very visceral, it's very direct, and that works. It just does. That said, this is from the hospitality perspective. I think you need to make sure that you have created an experience at your winery or in your events that you have well-trained and pleasant people, representing you. If it's not you or the owner or you running sales, and you have reps who are working in these capacities in your tasting room or beyond, you really want to make sure you have the right people in place to give these consumers that great experience that will bond them to your brand. So I think that's important. I would say, like, from the perspective of wineries I visited in Italy, most of them really excel at this. Again, creating that environment that enables the consumer to just feel transported and to remember the wines, the environment, the people forever. So I would say that's an advantage, the Italian wine culture and industry has. But it's important to stay on top of that and make sure that you are actually, showing your best face, your friendliest
Yeah.
face, and your most inviting face to the people who are coming to you.
Definitely. And I think it's an important call out that you mentioned, that kind of consumer loyalty with American wine consumers, how dedicated they'll become to a brand where they've had a phenomenal experience. I know that was definitely true for the boomers. Are you still seeing that even with younger consumers as well?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I think younger consumers are so driven by experience. When I say younger, I'm talking more millennial. I think the Gen Zs, they're still pretty young. They may not have the budget to pick up and, go to Piedmont or something. But I think they're very much driven by in-person experiences, in-person interactions, the environment. They want to know, of course, more about the winery, who's behind it, what the actual practices are. So those winery tours, very important to these consumers. Show me how you make the wine, show me the vineyard. Don't just sort of talk the talk. I want to see that you're doing what you say you're doing, whether it's sustainable practices or, as far as you're supporting your workers, your vineyard workers, et cetera. All that really matters to this younger generation.
Yeah.
And so it can often make or break who they purchase from. And that continues to be the case. So I think maybe even more so than the older generations, this is mattering.
Yeah, definitely. So for those Italian wineries who are really investing in their hospitality and growing their, tourism, what are the best ways that they can translate that experience into a lasting relationship with the American consumer or buyer?
Well, I mentioned above, first of all, from a hospitality perspective, making sure you have the right people representing you. So that to me is very important. If you could have a really wonderful experience, if you're talking about a winery visit or tours, even events that you might do, but if you don't have the right people representing you, that could really sort of deter your efforts. So just make sure that you have people, whether it's family or great employees, making sure that you have good people who understand how to read the audience a little bit. Not everybody who comes to you will be at the same level or interest of wine. So that's a little bit of psychology, but just
Hmm.
make sure you have people representing you who maybe understand that a little bit. The other thing I was thinking about is I think it's important to be authentic. I know that we overuse that word, and sometimes it's sort of like, well, what exactly does that mean? I think it's important not to try to Americanize your experience too much. I think that I've seen that happen too. And I understand why. I mean, obviously, you want to make sure that you have someone who can speak English, presenting to American consumers where it makes sense, et cetera. But you don't want to try to replicate a Napa winery when you're sort of a family run winery in Chianti or something. Like, you should be who you are. I think just having some knowledge, being warm, being receptive, being welcoming, again, something the Italians are very good at,
Yeah.
is really important. It's over trying to make it feel like, what you think that American consumer might want.
Yeah.
So I always say add warmth and humor and they'll love you. I think it's
Yeah.
something. And then I talked about food. Some of the best visits I've had in Italy. It's interesting because you might either they would bring food to sort of present during the tasting, or give you the option of having lunch at the winery. What I found to be, again, something that as an American consumer, I guess you would say, I really liked was when they would offer dishes that were more regional, dishes that were made from recipes from their own staff or their own family. Instead of trying to flaunt the extravagant recipes, I mean, obviously there are going to be certain brands that want to elevate and that makes sense for them. They may have a chef on site, all of that. But I think for most people, it's like, be authentic. I love the idea of tasting, something that someone in your team's mother made or grandmother made. That's something I can't get at home. And I think that, again, Americans are traveling. Hopefully they are. I mean, you always have exceptions, of course, but I think most sort of wine interested Americans are traveling to experience something they can't get at home that's different and that feels natural to the place and to the winery. So, anyway, those are a couple things that I think can really appeal to American consumers.
Yeah. And I think that all consumers really sniff out authenticity or lack thereof these days. So to your point, if don't do what the Napa winery is doing if you're in Chianti, like there's something that only you can provide and do that because it'll feel so special.
Yeah, and I think, again, I've seen this in person, not only myself traveling, but working with these tours and going to wineries and seeing how these consumers are from all over the US and really from different perspectives, different wine knowledge, et cetera, how they interact with and react to the experiences. And the ones they love the most have been the authentic ones, where it's like, oh my gosh, this is a connection directly. It might sound kitschy again, but if it's real, it matters to them. Wow, this is amazing. This is something that you and your family have had. I've never had this before. I've never had this version of this before. Wow, this is all local, this is regional cuisine. I wouldn't have known about this. I think that curious people love surprises and
Hmm.
they like something new that they might not have known. They don't want the same thing that, they've already experienced. So,
Yeah, exactly. Well, a couple more questions on this last takeaway, which is about reaching American consumers creatively without necessarily a huge budget. So, what brands or maybe campaigns have stood out to you recently because they approached consumer engagement in a very creative and fresh way?
yeah, so I have sort of two examples. One is in the US and the other is in Italy. So I don't know if you'd prefer me to.
Yeah.
Okay, so the one in the US, I'm a big fan of Rain, which is Carlo Mondavi's project on the Sonoma
Hmm.
Coast. I've used what Carlo does and what the brand does a few times in talking about marketing because I don't even know how deliberate. I don't want to assume that they're not being extremely deliberate, but they're doing, to me, in my perspective, they're doing a great job of kind of presenting the good, the bad, and the ugly of wine. And I actually like that. So their website is pretty raw. It's real. It shows the good and the bad. I mean, I love one of their images is them harvesting in the middle of the night and, looking tired and looking like, it's work. So I
Hmm.
actually like how authentic that is. It's not just a
Yeah.
beautiful vineyard. It's not just showing a polished table. It's showing this is farming. This is unpredictable. We love it, but it's work. And I think that to me, that really interested me. I liked that they took the approach. They also have sort of focused in on a few excellent wines. They're not trying to flood the market with product. Like, earlier we were saying, focus SKUs, intentional and honest branding. Obviously, Carlo's involved in environmental and sustainable causes. Those resonate with him and it makes sense for the brand. So, again, it's just something that I can understand. It feels real and it feels pretty honest. And
Hmm.
I like that. So I think honesty, it doesn't have to be perfect. Even your imagery, it doesn't have to be perfectly styled. It can feel a little messy. It can feel a little raw. It can feel a little real. I like that, and I think that that's what a lot of consumers like to see. It feels more like something they can approach. So that's an example of one, and then the other one in Italy, Luano. I hope we're pronouncing that Luano Winery in
Wow,
Tuscany.
beautiful accent.
Oh gosh. Yeah, I try. Anyway, they're a Chianti Classico producer. It's a family-run winery. The Palumbo family runs it. Their vibe is, I think they use the term seriously fun,
Hmm.
and their marketing reflects that. They're really playful without dumbing down the product. They educate while they're entertaining. And, they do tick all the boxes of a serious producer, but they have fun with themselves, and it really disarms you as a consumer. I think their whole family is about humor, they're fun, whether in person or through their photography, their marketing, all of it just feels very real. And it feels real to their family. I'm not saying that that approach is appropriate for everyone, right? Like, if that's not kind of the tone of your family and the way you run your business and the way you approach things, that's not right for you. But this just feels very, again, it feels very honest, and it kind of reaches across all of their communications. Now, the important thing is the wine is great. I'm all about the product first. I should say that about everything I'm talking about. You have to have good wine now to be competitive in the market. People are more savvy than they used to be, and there's a lot of great wine in the market. So you got to
Yeah.
start with that. But then beyond that, there are ways to communicate what you're doing in a way that feel right to you. And I think it's brave of a winery like Luano to take the approach they are, because they're very serious. I mean, I've tasted with the family in person. They're very passionate about what they do, and the wines are great. But they also know how to have a good time with it. And I think that's a really sweet kind of balance. At least to an American consumer, they respond to it.
Yeah. I have a mentor who always used to say, sincere, not serious,
Yes.
which is
Yes.
like kind of where you're headed. Just be who you are. Don't worry about being stuffy about it. Even if you're, selling wine for $300 a bottle, you can have fun with that.
Absolutely, and I've seen that with some of these really high-end producers. Another example, I guess it's more a person than the brand, but, Roederer, I
Hmm.
think, Cristal, Jean-Baptiste Le Caillon, who's their winemaker, he is, he's running an incredibly influential and obviously very storied wine business, or
Yeah.
a, you know
Institution.
institution, right? But he himself in person, he's so excited. He's like a kid sometimes when you're tasting with him. He's like, "Oh wow, you have to taste this. Look what I did!" And it's so infectious. He's so confident in his own skin. He's okay, kind of having fun and just showing you how excited he is. He certainly could sit down and give a master class to anyone on all levels of champagne production, but he doesn't need to do that. And I've watched people get engaged with these brands who might not have otherwise thought they could even understand it, but because
Hmm.
of him and his approach and his excitement, it really makes a difference. So I think at all levels that can really resonate with people.
Yeah. What great examples. Thank you so much for sharing those with us and for everything you've shared with us today. I mean, I could keep talking for a long, long time, but I will respect your time. So, we like to wrap up here on our show with a rapid fire quiz where we ask our guests three questions just to help the listeners better understand the US market and this episode. So, just answer in the best sound bites you can.
Okay.
First, what is your number one tip for mastering Italian wine to the US market?
I would say focusing on secondary and growing markets as a commitment. And I talked about this earlier. Cities like Atlanta, Boulder, Savannah, they're hungry for wine. Those consumers will be loyal to your brand if you commit to them. You can have a presence in the larger markets, but don't put all of your energies into only the saturated markets. Do your research and show up in person.
Great advice and great soundbite. Good job. Number two, what is something you would have told your younger professional self about working in the US wine industry?
Definitely that it's okay to follow the road less traveled, and it's okay if your long-term plans change. I think some of the best career experiences for me were unexpected, and staying nimble has really kept me engaged and relevant and, sane. So
Yeah. I think that is such perfect advice, especially as earlier on you said, like, you can't, even your marketing playbook right now, your sales playbook can't be what it once always was. So, this idea of don't worry if the long term plan changes really is a through line that applies to so many things.
absolutely.
Okay, last one. What is your favorite place to drink wine in your hometown?
So I grew up in Northern Michigan. I've lived in a lot of places. I've lived in the Midwest. I've been out in California. I lived in England for a while, but I grew up in Traverse City, Northern Michigan on Lake Michigan. So one of my favorite places to drink wine there is on my dad's back patio, which overlooks, I really love it. It overlooks the Grand Traverse West Bay, and it's just like,
Oh,
he has these great Adirondack chairs back there, and we just sit with wine in hand and overlooking the lake. And there are always beautiful colors coming off of the water. And they've got some great wines up there in Michigan as well. So
yeah.
I do sample, some of their wines when I'm home, and I really enjoy doing that. So
Amazing, amazing. This is a plug too, I think, for anyone who hasn't been. Travel to Lake Michigan. It's one of the most special places I've ever been. It's just
yeah,
magic.
I'm a little biased, but there's definitely, there's a lot going on right now in Northern Michigan as far as the wine and food scene. It's one of these great kind of domestic getaways that I think people are starting to experience. And actually, they're having a big food wine festival. It's the second year happening this August. I'm going to be participating there as well.
Amazing.
So, and they're sold out. They've sold out last year. They're going to sell it again this year.
Oh,
So there's clearly a interest and demand for checking that out.
very, very cool. Well, Susan, thank you again so much for your time and all of this really incredible, insightful advice that you've shared with everyone. If anyone wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to reach you?
You can reach me. You can go to my website, which is Resplendent Ink, INK, .com. I'm on Instagram. I'm at Sus Kostrzewa, Suskostrewa on Instagram. And I'm on LinkedIn. I'm all over the place on social media. So you can find me under my name or again under Resplendent Ink.
Wonderful. Well, I really hope I get to see you at, of all things, a wine experience sometime soon.
Yes, I think we should make that happen.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Susan.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap for this episode of Masterclass US Wine Market. Thank you so much for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode and want to stay up to date with the latest industry trends, remember to like, follow, and share our podcast. And if you find value in our conversations, please leave us a review to help others discover the show and grow our community. Stay tuned for new episodes every Monday. Until then, brindiamo il vostro successo!